It was 1 year, 1 day ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukrainians stood up to defend themselves, and defense and offense, offense and defense, it just goes on and on. Russia marked the anniversary by suspending nuclear treaties. President Biden marked the anniversary by visiting Ukraine. But the peacemakers of America showed up in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Hill, asking politicians to think of peace, peaceful settlement, negotiations. Nobody's telling us how many people are dying from both sides, but people keep pumping up whatever they got. We have someone who led the effort at Washington, D.C. For encouraging politicians to encourage negotiation instead of pumping more guns and more ammunition. Medea Benjamin, welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Hi, wonderful to be on with you.
Medea Benjamin is co-founder of Code Pink. Um, why was it important for peace movement to show up Capitol Hill and talk to politicians?
What we see happening in Washington, D.C. is just terrible. They keep sending more and more billions of dollars worth of weapons to Ukraine every time they cross their own red line because they say, we're not going to send HIMARS, then they send them. We're not going to send tanks, then they send them. Now it's about fighter jets. Every time they cross their line, we go deeper and deeper into this war. And on the other hand, we hear from people like General Mark Milley, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that this war is not winnable on the battlefield. So, why do we keep sending more weapons? Why do we keep encouraging the Ukrainians to keep fighting instead of going to the negotiating table?
Is there a negotiating table?
There's always a negotiating table. And we see that the Ukrainians and the Russians were actually negotiating in late March, early April, with the help of the head of Turkey, Erdogan, as well as there were other negotiations that it turns out that the former prime minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, was involved in. And in both cases, we find out that the West actually encouraged Zelensky not to continue with those negotiations, but to fight on, because in the end, what the West wanted was to weaken Russia. And so we have Ukrainians dying every single day in this fight that can only be won at the negotiating table. And I think the outlines of the negotiation are very clear. Russians would leave Ukraine, that Ukraine would be a neutral country, not a member of NATO, and there would be decisions made about how to rule people in the Donbass and about Crimea, and that could be done later on. Security guarantees for Ukraine that it wouldn't be invaded in the future. I mean, all of these things were being worked out. They are what is going to be worked out in the end. But is the end going to be in a month or two from now, or in a year or two from now, or will we actually move towards a nuclear war, which could be the end of life on this planet? And I think that depends on us. I think that depends on the people of the world rising up and demanding from their leaders that they do everything they can to push for a peace process. And certainly we haven't heard that from Biden. What we hear from him is, we are with you until victory. But there is no victory in this war.
Do you have any idea how many people might have died on both sides? Of course, Russian fighting are human beings, and so are Ukrainians. Any idea? I mean, nobody is talking about casualties here.
We have no idea. What we heard at one time from Mark Milley, he just threw out saying 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers and 100,000 Russian soldiers, but with absolutely no proof of that. I think those are high figures, but still, the figures are totally unknown to us. We see that there are groups that have been trying to document the casualties and have come up with about 13,000 Russian soldiers. But again, we don't know. And the civilian casualties We don't know them either. But every single life is precious, and every day that goes by, more precious lives are being wasted.
Medea, I mean, you walk on those aisles all the time in Washington, D.C., try to influence people in multiple ways and get their hearing. How was your lobby day? Were you able to talk to some senators and congressperson, which will matter in this?
We were only able to talk to their staff because Congress is not in session this week. But it is the staff that often make these decisions. So we had very important talks. We went to the offices of all of the members of the House Armed Services Committees. And then we went to individual offices. Right now, there are 11 members of the Republican Party that have signed on to a House Resolution 113 that calls to an end to the weapons to Ukraine and calls for negotiations. But there are no Democrats right now that will sign that or that will introduce their own resolution. And that's what we are pushing for, either a bill or a resolution that both Democrats and Republicans can agree to. Unfortunately, the only bipartisan bill, well, it's not a bill, it's a letter that went to President Biden, was one calling for fighter jets to be sent to Ukraine. So we have a long way to go. But I must say that our reception was quite good, especially among the staff. And I think that this is a political issue. They have to hear more from their constituents. And now we see an AP poll that says that for only 48% of Americans want to send more weapons to Ukraine. That is a very low number given the media narrative that we hear, given what is emanating from the White House and from Congress that is pro weapons to Ukraine. The fact that only 48% agree with that. And when we went to the offices of our congresspeople, we told them that statistic, which has been the number of people supporting the weapons has been going down and down as the months go by. And we said that you should be representing that. There should be at least 52% of Congress that says no, or at least questions this blank check for weapons. And that's not what we have now.
Madhu Benjamin, what's your feel? Do you think some hawks in American military-industrial complex want to do to Russia what we did to Soviet Union in Afghanistan?
Well, we heard this directly from the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who, came to his position directly from the board of the largest weapons manufacturer, Raytheon. So there is certainly an interest in the weapons manufacturers to keep this war going. And there is an interest among people in the what I might call the warrior state who want to use this opportunity to weaken Russia, but they want to do that so that then they can focus their attention on China. I mean, they're crazy if they want to take on not only Russia, but China. And yet, this is big business, and there is quite a vicious circle between the weapons industries, the lobbyists that pay for the elections of different senators and members of Congress, and the people who go in and out of the Pentagon from the weapons lobbies. Unfortunately, what President and General Eisenhower warned us about back in 1961 of beware of the undue influence of the military industrial congressional complex is exactly what we are seeing today.
But yeah, there is quite a bit of groups who are concerned about the nuclear warfare. Why only 40 people showed up on the lobbying day? Where are these people who have been writing and opposing nuclear weapons and things like that? I mean, it seems when it comes to nuclear power, all the treaties and every conversation to ensure it doesn't happen is happening. People are loosening there is strength in the area of a powerful voice and things like that. And I was on a Council on Foreign Relations list, and there was one presentation that two nuclear powers can have conventional warfare and can win also. So I say, wait a minute, who is presenting and why? So, what are your thoughts? Why the people who are against nuclear, warfare are not speaking up?
It's a very, very good question that you raise, and I wonder that myself because there are so many groups that understand the dangers of nuclear weapons and nuclear war. We have the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists telling us that we're 90 seconds away from midnight, closest to a nuclear war or Armageddon, we should call it, than we have ever been. And we have Russia just now pulling out of the only arms treaty left with the United States, the New START treaty. And so we are at a very, very dangerous moment. And perhaps you and I can work together to get some of these groups to join us, just like we should be working together to get people of the faith based community into the halls of Congress. The faith based community, as you well know, does not want to see an end to God's creation. And so we should be swarming those halls with people who are concerned about the path that we have taken and want to show Congress that the correct path right now is one to use diplomacy. In fact, that is the only rational path that we can take.
Well, thank you so much, Medea Benjamin, for your time.
Thank you so much. Nice being on with you.